Hi everyone, thank you all for attending today. So I'm gonna make this short and sweet for everyone. I know everyone has a busy schedule, but today we'll be talking about student-oriented transition, and I'm going to do a brief introduction of us. So again, my name is Mari, and I am a graduate assistant here in the Student Activities office that deals with advisor support and risk management. And then
my name is Lauren. I am another graduate assistant in the Student Activities Center, and I am a co-GA with Mari. I work with student organizations as well, but specifically officer support, so supporting officers throughout their time in their roles and helping them be successful throughout their roles with their organization.
Perfect. So today we decided to partner up to kind of talk to you all about the student-oriented transition process. So we'll go ahead and get started.
All right, so obviously we know transitioning is a big part of moving year to year with our organizations, whether or not you're a returning officer, continuing officer, or an advisor. But I want to talk about why this transition process is so important. So firstly, it aids in transferring that important organizational information and knowledge. So whether or not, like I said, we're moving from an old advisor to a new advisor, old officers to new officers, this is really a crucial time to help in transferring any important organizational knowledge, information, whether that's through transition binders, information meetings, whatever that may be. Inform and prepare incoming officers for their new positions. So if you are having new officers stepping into those roles, this is a really great time to inform them and prepare them on what those expectations and what their time in that role would look like. And then finally, this really overall contributes to the success of the organization for the upcoming academic year. So really gives your organization a really strong platform to go off of when they head into that next academic year for the organization.
All right, so I'll go ahead and go over kind of the 5 W's about student-oriented transition. So first, the who does it involve? So this is primarily going to focus on the old officers and the new officers that are in the org, along as with the idea of maybe you're moving out of your advisor position, there's a new one taking place. Those would also be people like you that would be involved with this transition process. And basically what this is all about, as Lauren kind of touched on, is going to be a little bit of feedback. So feedback from the old officers, from the advisor to the new people in place about kind of what worked, what didn't, expectations of everyone as well in the org, and then along with the transitioning and the planning for the next coming year. And where can this take place? We definitely recommend meetings, whether it be in person or online, whatever's most beneficial for everyone in the org, and also doing one-on-one meetings really helpful as well, whether it's the old president with a new president, the old treasurer with a new treasurer, even the old advisor with the new advisor as well. This kind of helps make sure that there's smooth, seamless transition as well. And then when do we recommend for this transition process to start would be 1 to 2 months before the end of the semester. And this is recommended because a lot of times old officers may be potentially graduating or leaving the university. And so because of that, we want to make sure there's enough time for everyone to be able to communicate with each other and give the information that they need to do well in their role for the next coming year.
So what does transitioning look like? So obviously we've talked about why it's important and the 5 W's of transitioning, but what does it look like? So there's some key aspects that are really important to accomplish and look at when transitioning your organization. So first is going to be your roster. So it's really, really important to update your rosters in OrgSync. I know you get lots of emails from us about updating your roster, making sure if a new officer is stepping in or someone's no longer serving as an officer, it's really important to update that OrgSync roster, because that'll be where we ensure that the appropriate people are tagged. So you as an advisor needs to make sure that you're properly tagged so that you are able to review event applications as well as registration when that's submitted. But it also gives us more information on who to contact regarding important things. One of the things that I do in my graduate assistant role is our student org chronicles, and we pull from the current officers roster list, and those are the people that get that email, as well as Mari pulls all the advisors from the roster. And so that's how we figure out who to communicate with and send important information outside of event applications and registration. So definitely important to update your rosters whenever there are changes, especially during this transition period. Checking accounts are going to be another really big one. So make sure you're submitting your checking account verification request in OrgSync. So if you go to OrgSync, click on the Forms tab and search checking account to be that very first form that pops up. And advisors can submit it, presidents, treasurers, anyone who's a part of the organization can submit that request. But that at least gets the process started so that we're able to add and remove signatories from the account. One rule of thumb that I really like to share with advisors is I highly recommend that at least the advisor is on the account. That way, year to year, if for some reason the checking account changes, falls through the cracks, or for some reason you're unable to set up an appointment with Wells Fargo to make those changes, at least the advisor, who is going to be the most consistent position from year to year for the organization, is on the checking account so that you're still able to make edits and remove people from the account. Because one thing that happens is sometimes we forget to make edits to the bank account, and then the people that are on the account have long since graduated, and we no longer have access to the account for those funds. So I definitely recommend submitting those as soon as you know who the new officers are going to be. Those requests typically take about 1 to 2 weeks, dependent on president and advisor approval. So it's just another thing to keep in mind and remind your officers about whenever you know who's going to be stepping into those new roles. And then the last thing we'll touch on is registration. And so registration is really important. As I mentioned, as an advisor, you want to make sure that you're properly tagged and reflected on the roster. So that will ensure that you are properly tagged on registration as well as event applications. In addition to that, when you are reviewing and approving registration, just making sure you're taking a glance and really looking over all of the information, including officer information such as their EUID, email, as well as making sure that your advisor information is correct as well, because we do use registration info quite a bit as contact and just how we check eligibility. So just a couple things to keep in mind from the advisor aspect, making sure you're updating the roster, making sure bank account requests are being made and added, and then registration, just making sure you're properly tagged on all of that and making sure you are keeping an eye out for that whenever your organization submits that registration.
Okay, so for important deadlines to be aware of, the first one would be obviously elections. I think it's important to know when org are having an election. A lot of times will happen during the spring, but also to be aware of what their constitution says about election to make sure that they're following along the process that is stated. And it's also important to consider the transition period. So with the mindset that we had about 1 to 2 months prior to the semester to start your transition process, be mindful of when the elections are to make sure there's enough time for that transition period to work, where everyone that needs to be there will be involved and all the information that needs to be distributed can be distributed as well. And then the other thing will be our event application, and this is just kind of a reminder but also helpful with their transition process, since sometimes the new officers will be added on the roster now, and so they might be submitting event application for end of year event. The last day to submit event application for regular event, and by regular I mean those that are not seen as being potentially risky, will be May 3rd, since it needs to be 5 business days before, and that's the requirement for all of our regular events. And then for those that are a little more potentially risky, April 12th is going to be the last day they can submit, which was yesterday. So there are no more allowed. But that is 15 business days prior to May 3rd. So that is why that is the date for that. And events are seen as potentially risky if there is a very high head count, including number of off-campus guests, if there's a guest speaker, if there are going to be any sort of hazardous materials being used, or if there's any sort of physical activity as well, amongst other things too, that can contribute that. And it's also important to know that it's not up to the student or to determine whether or not their event is risky. It's going to be up to the event safety committee. And if there's more information that y'all need on that, you can reach out to us and we can provide that information as well. And then the other thing to keep in mind will be registration, which Lauren kind of touched on, but again, it is the annual process now. And so when it will start up probably won't be until the late summer, early fall, so July, August. And it's important, as we said, to make sure everything is updated with the roster so that registration can start and it goes quickly for the student org. And so just as a reminder, keep an eye out during that time for an email, because you will need to approve registration as an advisor. And so right now there's not a whole lot you need to do for it, but once you get that notification, the student board can't be approved overall until you as the advisor has approved it. So that's just something to keep in mind as well.
All right, as an advisor, something just to keep in mind when you are going through elections, officer transitions, and even just throughout your time as an advisor for your organization, eligibility is an important thing just to keep in the back of your mind. And eligibility for all of our student org officers is based off of GPA, enrollment, as well as student conduct, their conduct standing with the Dean of Students. And so just to keep in mind, just being aware of kind of where your officers are at each of those different points. So GPA, the minimum GPA requirement for our student org officers is 2.4. They have to maintain full-time enrollment status. So for undergraduate, that's 12 hours. For grad students, that's 9 hours. So just something to keep in mind, as well as making sure that they're maintaining good conduct standing. So if you ever notice anything or are aware of any of those changes with your officers, it's important just to have a conversation with them. We do run eligibility checks pretty much once a month. And so you can be contacted about an officer that may be ineligible. We also contact the officers that are ineligible themselves. So just one thing to keep in mind, if you are aware of a student that's stepping into an officer role that may not be eligible, just having a conversation with them about eligibility as well as maintaining their eligibility throughout their role. This will be really important just so that your organization is able to be successful and that you're not having last minute officer changes throughout your year.
And as we kind of touched on earlier about meeting about student org transition, our recommendation is having an advisor meeting with the new officer, and this will provide an opportunity, and this can be whether or not you're the advisor for next year, or if you're not, to keep in mind when you're talking to the new advisor, to have this meeting to talk about advisor expectations. So what are your expectations of your role? What are the students' expectations of you and your role, and also with the officers as well, what is expected of them in their role and what you expect of them as well. This kind of prevents this encourages clear communication so there's no confusion or frustration in the future when people are confused about who's responsible for what. It's also a really good chance to talk about past events that have been held or hosted by the org. And these can be a time to talk about feedback, whether an event went well and you want to do it again for next year, or if an event has not been going well, if you want to maybe nix it and do a different event in the future, or figure out a way to improve it so that it performs better the next coming year. Another opportunity for this meeting would be to discuss the goals of the org. And usually the goals may stay the same from year to year with the officers, but there are also probably ideas that they want to pursue or new goals they want to pursue as well for their org to continue to expand and recruit more members. And this can also tie into the idea of new ideas for the org. This can be whether they, as we said earlier, new events that they want to pursue, whether it's like a gala or a fundraising event that they want to do, or even new initiative as well that they want to add to their org as part of their mission and their statement as well. And so that is all that we had for our presentation today. If there are any questions, you can always reach out to Student Activity, whether it is via our phone number, which is posted on here, or the email as well. And you can also stop by our desk as well to either talk to Lauren and myself, or also the coordinators that we have, Abby and Lisa too. So, but again, I just want to thank you all for taking your time to join us today for this presentation. And we hope that this information helps you and that this will encourage to make sure that these students will continue to succeed from year to year. We hate to see them dissolve when things don't work out with the transition process. We want to make sure that students still are having the chance to be involved with the org that they want to be in. But thank you. Have a great day. Okay.